Every army begins with one model that, for whatever reason, grabs your attention. It captures your imagination, inspires you, it makes you want to play that army, play that game. It's the model that starts an army, and today I'm going to be looking at a few of mine from around my collection. I have a sizable Blood Axis force, but the model that inspired me to launch it is one that hardly ever sees the table, the Metal Commando Knob from 2007. From head to toe, this model just exudes personality and power. With the models posing, you just read it from left to right, starting at the most congested parts of the model and moving out to the relative freedom of his power claw. He's got this cocky, kind of at ease pose, where he's resting his elbow on his knee, his bionic arm telling a story that this guy's been around a while. Your eye then goes up to his face, where he's chomping on a cigar, assumedly in celebration of a hard-fought victory. This makes him look tough, grizzled, and confident. Qualities all reinforced by a solid, confident pose. As your eyes move up, you see the goggles on his head, showing he's a commando, and then you get to the wacky grot in his back with a stick of dynamite. It's important that the grot is looking in the other direction, keeping the model from looking unbalanced. It also adds some levity to the model, in that it's both really funny and relatively light and thin compared to the heavy, stocky base that makes the commando himself. Your eye then drags back down the model to the right, following the arc of the power claw, passing the bandolier in his shoulder, and you're back on the ground. The back of the model has some great detail too, with a big backpack full of bullets that the grot's popping out of, and all the grenades and tactical gear you'd expect from any Orc commando. It's no surprise that this model inspired me to create a Blood Axis army, the sneakiest of the Orc clans. I had always had an interest in the Horus Heresy, ever since reading Horus Rising when I was a teenager. I thought the models that Forge World were putting out were incredible, and while I'd collected a few of the Mark III Marines, the army hadn't really gotten its teeth into me. That was when I got the Sakaran Battle Tank. This model is speed and power personified, and it's distinctly 30k. It's shaped like a wedge, not dissimilar to a hot rod with the front wheels lowered, which also gives it a natural feeling of forward momentum. It maintains the sharp, hard edges of Space Marine vehicles, while not just being a box, and the big fat treads and thick frontal armor plates show that this thing is fast, durable, and can drive through anything. It's covered in little cutaway hatches that are part of the Space Marine visual language, and those keep the bigger areas from just being flat, featureless panels. They still have enough space for army badges and the like though. Working our way up, we now get to the turret. Its big, Cylon-esque sensor suite makes it look high-tech, and its smoother edges are sleek and unlike what we usually see on Space Marine vehicles in 40k. The big ammo drums behind the long cannons show that these things are functional and they're going to spit a lot of lead downrange. Next, we move down and get to the engine block, with its industrial smokestacks, a common theme you'll see across Land Raiders, Dreadnoughts, and Rhino chassis vehicles in the 30k and 40k Space Marine ranges. We finally loop back around the sponsons, which are sturdier and more heavily armored than sponsons we see on the 40k Space Marine tanks. This is clearly a more advanced piece of equipment than your standard Razorback or Predator, and it's got the leg up on that tank in every conceivable way. In the case of my Empire army, two models had my attention long before I even had any interest in collecting it. These models were the Empire Captain with Hammer and Pistol and the Witch Hunter. I couldn't narrow it down to just one model, and these two contrast with each other so wonderfully that I had to include them both. First, we'll look at the Captain. He's got the trappings of nobility: a luxurious beard, an ornate hammer, big ostentatious feathers sticking out of his helmet, and a sweeping cloak. However, he's holding a relatively simple flintlock pistol, betraying his frontline soldier status, and his armor is relatively simple, mirroring the armor you see on state troops. He's clearly on the front lines, fighting as hard as any one of his troops. Like the Commando, he also reads strongly in a left-to-right direction, with his cape, feathers, and pistol all pointing to the right, giving the model a dynamic sense of motion without having an especially elaborate pose. Standing in contrast to him is the Witch Hunter. This model instead reads right to left, and holds a brooding pose that threatens impending violence. He's peeking out from under his hat, which also ties into the secretive, hidden motives of the Witch Hunter. His hat also bears a cross medallion and a pair of feathers that push the eye even further to the right, as well as show off that this character may be a bit eccentric. Working down, his face has an eye patch and a mustache, barely visible behind a high gorget. It's important that most of his face is again covered here. It shows he's a mysterious character who has his own motives and goals. His chest plate and armor look similar to the armor you'd see on an Empire troop, but more ornate. Witch hunting is clearly a lucrative business. He also has a purity seal with a long scroll of parchment going along his coat as it trails outward, displaying his blessings by the church to do what he does. Next we get to his pistol, still holstered and being drawn. He's supporting the holster with his other hand, making this look like a measured, thought-out display. The gloves on his hands show he's not the kind of man who wants to get his hands dirty, and they act as a barrier between him and what he hunts. A skull is in the pommel of the pistol, a grim decoration and a reminder of the witch hunter's deadly duties. We then work down to the leggings and boots of the witch hunter, both of which are echoed across the Empire range and state troops and characters. These ground the character in the world, literally, and show that while he stands apart from the rank and file, he doesn't stand above them. As we look around the model, there's a knife in his boot, showing that he's prepared for anything. Then, once we get to the back, we see the broadsword that follows the model's angle perfectly, leading your eye along the coat, and a satchel of scrolls presumably carrying bounties or incantations to fight the various monsters of the old world. It's really important to note that he's drawing his pistol and not his sword, that blade apparently being kept as a last resort for opponents where a bullet just won't be enough. These two models stand so well with each other, clearly being part of the same range, but being designed with completely contrasting poses and styles. The way they even run in opposite directions is impressive too, and makes me really love fielding them as a pair on the battlefield. Thanks for watching my video about some of my favorite models. These things are so subjective, but I really want to share this idea and show off some of my favorite sculpts. What are the models that launched your armies? I'd love to read about them in the comments, and if you want to keep up to date with the channel, you can hit that big old subscribe button and follow Camhammer on social media. See you next time!